Hi, everyone. Hope you're looking after yourselves. Welcome to another episode of Comics 101, where we dive into the world of fantasy and all things comic book related. Today's episode is Game of Thrones based, and we're calling it Two Maesters. Joshua and I will be talking about certain locations in the world of Game of Thrones and what we love about them, and also what we'd bring with us if we existed there. But first, Josh, would you like to say a quick hello to everyone?
Hello, everyone. Hopefully all of you are well where you are. So currently now we're both Westeros in London, so it's heading towards the evening time. But for all of you who are watching the podcast today, we're glad that you're here, and we'd like you to please subscribe as well. And also we will be producing more and more Game of Thrones content coming up in the coming weeks, especially as the spin-off series comes into effect.
Oh yeah, I can't wait for that spin-off series, honestly. I've been seeing a lot of the posters come out and still reading the Fire and Blood book, but yeah, Fire and Blood, that's it. Been reading the spin-off book. That's been getting me quite excited. How are you doing today, Joshua?
Really good, thanks. I think one good thing is I thought it'd rain today, especially the way that the clouds have been going recently, but thankfully I was able to go out for a nice walk as well. And also on what you were saying about the Fire and Blood book, I was actually just listening to it on audiobooks with Audible, and it's just the lore and the history behind it and the many different things that they can then bring out of that book that could potentially be discussed today as well, due to the rich history of Game of Thrones universe.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's no way I can't not talk about it. And I have been watching some of the Game of Thrones TV show as well, just to verse myself in what was going on in that. But yeah, excited. And by the way, it is raining right now, so you timed that walk perfectly. Congratulations on that one. That's a silver lining for today. So now, to start things off, we are going to talk about locations in Game of Thrones. As you know, there's a massive world to Game of Thrones. As you can see behind me, I've got the maps up. We've got Essos to the east, and we've got Westeros, where the books mainly take place. Now, there's quite a lot of different climates in Westeros, different areas. You've got the extreme colds of the north, where the White Walkers belong. We've got the north going down to the Riverlands, the Westerlands, where Castle Rock is, got King's Landing, then down into the Stormlands, where Storm's End is, and then into the Reach, where Highgarden is, and Old Town, and then all the way down into Dorne, where the Dornishmen are. There's quite a lot there. Is to sort of give a good taster. Is it what sort of area tickles your fancy the most, Josh?
I would say for me is Harrenhal, and also the history behind it. The fact that Harrenhal was the seat of Harren the Black, so one of the kings of the Iron Islands, and it was a period before Aegon's conquest. So the Men of Pike, the people, the Ironborn, the Iron people, had then conquered the Riverlands. So then Harren the Black was the king of the Iron Islands, but also of the Riverlands as well. And the fact that ever since his defeat by Aegon the Conqueror, that Harrenhal's literally been cursed when it's been passed down from one to another. 3 or 4 houses have been completely wiped out, been killed, including Harren's house, when Aegon attacked with his dragons and literally burnt the whole castle. And it was the point that people saying that it was glowing white. The castle was actually glowing from the heat of the fire from the dragons, because Aegon the Conqueror was asked him to surrender, similar to the other lords in Westeros. Yeah. He said, "You can't get me. This castle is impregnable." Basically, he's
famous last words.
Well, you can't. Well, castles can't stop dragons. So literally burn everyone inside, including Harren and his whole family. And it's just the fact that that's how the Greyjoys then became the prominent family in the Iron Islands, just because the Harren's family had been basically wiped out. And the fact that there was a major period in time where the Iron Islands actually ruled the Riverlands, and the Riverlands were subjected to constant raids, having to provide slaves to the Iron Islands, and the fact that it kind of seems like they never forgot it, especially if you like go into the history of the Riverlands and the fact that they have really, really strong hatred for the Iron Islands as well because of that period as well.
Yeah, I mean, totally well-founded as well. I'd be pretty pissed off if someone kept pillaging me and my family for a long time. They are very like tough, hard people, the Iron Islanders, and the way Pike is sort of described in the books, it's rainy, it's stormy. There's no luxury to living there, and there's certainly no luxury to the lifestyle of the Iron Islanders. And you definitely get a sense that they're based off Vikings, because part of their whole culture is reaving and pillaging, and it very much has that strong influence of a very tough lifestyle. And you know, they're big seamen as well. They sail around everywhere. The Iron Fleet is regarded as like one of the toughest fleets out there. Probably not somewhere I'd want to live in the Game of Thrones world. I mean, there's a lot of places that I wouldn't want to live. And if we're thinking about this episode as like a Homes and Away or a Come Dine With Me episode, I definitely would not want to be visiting Pike for dinner or just going to buy a house there. It sounds like an absolute terrible place to live.
Yeah.
Would you want to live there?
Definitely not. It's like, especially because that leads on to like the second place I'd like to discuss, which you mentioned.
Oh yeah, go on.
The fact that it's, as you said, very similar to the Viking era, especially the fact that there's very little there at all. So that causes them to have to actually go out and raid and also have to steal and, as you said, pillage, because there's literally nothing on the island for them to have. And I think the one thing about Pike that is also really important is that the fact that because they're an island unto themselves, they kind of act like the Dornish at times, that, okay, whatever happens on the mainland happens to the mainlands. We're completely separate. And I think that's one of the things that it's kind of similar to the way that the Dornish see themselves, is that during the periods of time, Pike has just led several the Greyjoys and also the line of Harren as well have led rebellions as well against the kings of Westeros, just to basically saying that we are separate. And it's also weird that they have like a different god to the rest of Westeros. So either in Westeros it's the old gods or the seven, while the people on Pike have their drowned god. And also, I was like reading like some of the history from one of the lore books that George R. Martin had written. He said that the fact that they aren't descendants from the first men, that they're people from somewhere else. So that's why they don't have... And they're not descendants of like children of the forest either, that they don't have any link to like the old gods or the seven, that they're their own people in and of itself. That's why they have their own drowned god. And that's why their lifestyle is so different to the rest of the people in Westeros. Because you could kind of say that the Lannisters are kind of close to the Tyrells in the way they act. And you could potentially say that the people of the Riverlands are kind of close to the North and the way that they act, but it's just like people in Pike are completely different from everybody else. Like similar to Dawn, where Dawn see themselves as completely separate from the rest of Westeros.
Yeah, you could say that they like have a very savage lifestyle, and you know their god is so called the drowned god, and this thing they constantly say, "What is dead may never die," and I've seen some great memes about that. But it is a very, very cool culture they have, but also very, I wouldn't say uncivilized. They have like their own sort of code. You could say like, you know, you pay the iron price for something. If you buy something, you pay the gold price, but the iron price is you take it. You literally kill someone and you take what's theirs. It's pretty wild. You have to excuse me. I moved on a bit quickly from Harrenhal there, but would you rather live in Harrenhal or would you rather live in Pike?
I would have to pick Pike just because of the curses. Like,
I can, like, those curses are fun.
Like the different people. Like, for example, you have let me quickly go. So you've got like Gregor Clegane was put in charge of Harrenhal, and then he gets poisoned by a spear. Then you also have the fact that at Harrenhal is where Jaime then also loses his hand, where his hand's cut off. And then also the fact that you've got many people who, you've got like the Castellan, so Armory Lorch, who was put in charge by Tywin Lannister after he'd conquered Harrenhal. He was put in charge as a Castellan. When the Boltons then arrived, they then throw him, he gets eaten by a bear. You literally go from like, since Harren the Black died, there's like 4 or 5 houses who've basically been wiped out, who've lived there. Either it's revolting against the Iron Throne, revolting against the Riverlands, revolting against different lords, or it's just like intrigue and killing within their own family.
Yeah, it's a very unlucky place to live. It's kind of like was it a poisoned chalice in the Game of Thrones, or the king of Westeros bestows Harrenhal on you. It does have a lot of prestige to it, but there's that curse that you do read about a lot in the books, the Song of Fire and Ice, but also in Fire and Blood as well. Not a place I would take lightly, although it is the biggest castle in Westeros. So and it is somewhat like pretty badass in that respect, but it's also really impractical. Like, it's too big. You need like a massive army to like man it all. And well, the threat of dragons in Fire and Blood just proved that it was useless. And I guess when Daenerys arrives, spoiler alert, when Daenerys arrives later on in the Game of Thrones series, I don't think Harrenhal would have a chance against the dragons either. We'll get double cooks, basically. Yeah, we wouldn't want that to happen.
And one last thing, I also remember like Peter Baelish, the Littlefinger, he then also gets Harrenhal as well in the books and in the TV series. And in the TV series, spoilers here, the fact that he gets killed, he basically never gets Harrenhal. He never actually goes there, even though he's the lord of it, which is another part of the curse as well. The fact he's been given such a wonderful title for his service to the Lannisters, conspiring against the Starks, conspiring against the Hand of the King, conspiring against the Baratheons, and the fact that he then dies not actually getting what his actual land that was given to him by the Lannisters.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I mean, he did well to avoid going there at first. He's probably like, well, I've heard about that curse, so I ain't going there. But, well, I guess the curse catches you no matter where you are. You don't have to be at home to have some bad luck. Yeah, I did forget that. I do remember the scene. I just love Lord Baelish's accent in the TV show. That's such a great actor. He's like, Harrenhal's cursed. Brilliant. Okay, so talked about Harrenhal, talked about Pike. What was the other location you had in mind?
So for me, it was also Winterfell.
Excellent. The famous Winterfell.
So I think Winterfell would be a really nice place to be, especially compared to the past two. But I think the only issue would be the cold and just how cold Winterfell would be, especially for those who don't know, with the Game of Thrones universe, the seasons are for years. So like you could have a winter for 12 years, which would be seen as a long winter. You could have a summer for 15 years. So when it comes into the beginning of the books and the TV series, it's coming to the end of a very, very long summer. So I think they said maybe like 15 to 16 years of summer. And you can see it in many of the times in the books that Catelyn Stark mentions it, Ned Stark mentions it, that a lot of the people growing up at the time, so you've got like Renly Baratheon, you've got Jon Snow as well, that they've grown up during a period of a long summer, so they don't know what suffering is, while the older generation who have seen winter know how bad it is.
Yeah.
So I would say that imagine like 14 or 15 straight years of winter living in Winterfell it's just awful. But I think it's just like how much its importance in the North. Like it is like the huge bastion of the North, the largest castle in the North, and the fact that it's got so much history tied to it, especially the fact that there's a crypt in there where all of the Starks are buried. So I think after Ned's execution, spoiler alert, in season 1, they then actually do give his bones and they don't give his head back, but I think they give his body they send it back to the north for it to be buried in the crypt.
Yeah, they do.
It's just the fact that it's got so much history. The fact and the fact that I think only the Starks have been like Lords of the North or Kings of the North for the longest. Because like the Baratheons became Kings of Storm's End when Aegon conquered.
Mm-hmm.
The Tyrells became
that was through Snakery, though. That was through Snakery, but we can dive into that when I talk about Old Town. But yeah,
so they became in charge when during Aegon's conquest. The Lannisters came in charge, I believe, just before or during Aegon's conquest. So it's only really that you can think about that the Starks have literally been in charge of the North for the longest period of time. And I think you kind of see why. And part of it is the fact, one, Winterfell, two, the fact that one of the things that the North has is a long tradition of honor and a long tradition of being the last stand for men, especially the fact that you've got the wildlings that constantly break into and come across the wall into the North.
Yeah, exactly. It's a case of, hey, get off my lawn. Like all these wildlings coming over. Yeah, it's a really cool place, Winterfell and the North, and that whole, you talking about the weather, like totally characterizes some of the characters there. Like, Ned Stark, for example, very gruff, very sort of somber individual going, winter's coming. Wow. And then you've got like the Northerners being quite tough and like quite dark humored, but very to the point and upfront, and compared to how some of the families from in the south of Westeros behave. And Winterfell, you see that from the beginning. It's like the castle to begin with, along with King's Landing, but in the books it's described as quite a formidable, amazing castle. And as you say, there's crypts underground, and in those winter months they actually have special greenhouses, because I think Winterfell's built on a hot spring, so they can actually grow fruit and vegetables there. So, it's kind of like when you go to Sainsbury's and Marks and Spencer's and you can get some fruit and veg out season. Like, I'm quite glad that Winterfell has that option as well. Good place. We were talking about Harrenhal, we're talking about Pike, how we wouldn't want to live there. Winterfell, it's getting there. It's just the weather's a bit iffy, ain't it? And us being British people, we love talking about the weather. So,
and also forgetting that also constant raids potentially from the wildlings coming over as well. And then I think another reason I really do like Winterfell is also the Godswood as well.
Yeah, that's cool.
That they're like one of the last bastions of people who follow the old gods, and you also have like the Godswood there as well. And I think another reason I really do like Winterfell is, I think it's because the Starks, and it's like where the TV series and also the book series start. So it kind of feels like the home of the television series, the home of the book series is Winterfell. And I think that's one of the good things that they did in the TV series, was that they brought it all back to Winterfell, where it all began. There were other issues with the show, but I think they brought it full circle. It started in Winterfell, and now it's going to come to the large climax in Winterfell, I think is a key part. Because I think like the fact
full circle,
as you said, like you've got King's Landing, but the first place we're introduced to in the books is Winterfell.
Yeah, it does. It's really cool. Yeah, you're right. It does go full circle. And that's one of the few things the final series did well. But, that battle in the last series outside Winterfell between spoilers, the White Walkers and just everyone except for the Lannisters, pretty much. I'll probably save that for when we will do an episode on why the last series sucked so bad, but for now we'll keep that under wraps. But yeah, there's a lot of atmosphere to Winterfell, and the God's Word. And what was the other word you said? Was it the Wolf's Word? Yeah, really cool. There's like a scene where Ned Stark is cleaning his Valyrian steel sword, Ice, just by a lake that next to the tree that people worship the old gods have. What was it
That
called?
looks like that it's crying like blood tears as well.
Yeah. What the hell? I think that's a detail from a TV show that I didn't really look into too much, but it's a quite. Sorry, if I was worshipping something that was crying tears of blood, holy cow, that is quite a phenomenon. But yeah, very cool place. So if we're going to rate all the places we've talked about so far out of 10, where would we say is the worst place to live?
I would say the worst place would be Harrenhal, just because, as you said, it's a huge castle. If you don't have a large army, you potentially can't really hold the place or fight it properly. And also the fact that the amount of curses, especially the fact that it's a world with magic in it, that there potentially could be a curse.
Yeah, I can't take that risk.
Yeah, so you're better off staying in Pike. So I would say if I was to rate the three, I would say that I'd pick Winterfell, then Pike, then Harrenhal.
Yeah, I think I agree with you on that one. Winterfell, getting there, but I definitely wouldn't want to live in the Harrenhal just because I quite like my head on my shoulders. And a lot of bad things do happen in Game of Thrones. Okay, was there one more place you had in mind that you wanted to talk about?
So the last place for me was Storm's End, so the Storm's Lands. So
nice.
This place is basically it belonged to the House of Durandon.
Nice and easy one to pronounce.
I know. So some of these house names are really hard to say, because then if they're not mentioned at all, like in the TV series, you're like, okay, then when I'm reading the books, I say it this way.
Yeah.
Like, does everybody else say it this way, or is it something different?
Yeah. I don't think I'd say it different from you. You've got it spot on, I think.
So the House of Durandon were in charge of the Storm's End. So they were called the Storm Kings. And that when one of the first areas that Aegon the Conqueror arrived to was Storm's End after King's Landing. And then when he invaded, he fought against the House of Durandon and defeated them because they refused to bend the knee, and then therefore granted his half-brother, which they believe is his half-brother, who area which then became the lands of the Baratheons. So that's like the main connection between the House of Targaryen and also the House of Baratheons, is that it's believed that the person who came with him, I can't remember his name, who came with Aegon the Conqueror,
me neither,
half-brother, and that's the first connection that connected both families and gave the Baratheons like legitimate rights to the throne, because they are bastard line of the Targaryens. And also the fact that later on, as we mentioned in the last episode, that it was their King Robert's mother was also a Targaryen as well. So that also brought it full circle as well, to make sure to legitimize them as well.
Oh, really? I didn't know King Robert's mother was a Targaryen. But
so
I suppose
it's either his mother or grandmother, but I'm 90% sure it's his mother. And that's how he was also legitimized to be the king of Westeros, because basically they're saying that he's also a Targaryen through marriage through his mother.
I remember in the spin-off book, Fire and Blood, like the Targaryens do marry into the Baratheon family quite a lot. So there's definitely already some Targaryen blood there. I just find it hilarious though, because this is based off a medieval society, and it's like only they who have the blood can sit on the Iron Throne, the blood of like the royal family. So in this case, the Targaryens. But it's like, let's be honest, the only reason why that royal family is there is because through literally fire and blood, like they conquered. Like the fact that Robert Baratheon feels he needs to say that he's got Targaryen blood, therefore I can legitimately take this crown. Let's be honest, the de facto reason why anyone rules anything, especially in like the real world back in the medieval times, is just through like violence. Like if you're violent enough, like screw it, you don't even need to be related to the royal family. It's just an extra excuse, like cherry on the top. This is the extra reason why I should be in power. Can I just say, you've picked up on the worst places to live in Game of Thrones. I think Storm's End isn't too bad compared to the others. At least it's not cursed. At least it's not cold as hell. And at least it's not full of Viking pillagers. But the weather there is pretty bad. Like the Stormlands are called that for a reason. And I think Storm's End, if I remember correctly, was built by the Storm King in like the time of heroes, and it's supposed to withstand any siege from any army, and also the weather as well from the storm gods, which is one of their old gods or something, like some pagan belief they had. So probably an ideal place to live in if you're like living next to the coast and you just got absolutely terrible weather all the time. Almost like I'm describing London. Maybe London should build a big castle. Wow, good thing we got the Thames flood barrier to keep that out.
Yeah. And one last thing, also the Storm's End was always used as a launching pad as well for the Targaryen wars against Dawn.
Oh, really? Okay.
They would always, because literally the Stormlands are right next to Dawn. They would always use that as the staging point of any invasion into Dawn. So I think there was maybe 3 or 4 invasions, because I know that the first one was done by like Aegon the Conqueror, but literally throughout the reign of the Targaryens, that they would constantly invade Dawn and always use like the Storm's End as the launching point to invade Dawn.
Yeah, I do remember hearing about the Dornish Wars and the 4 of them, and like it's different reasons for each one. So first one they're trying to conquer Dawn, but just they turn up and all the Dornish are just hiding, and they do this like guerrilla ambush war on the Targaryens. Even though they got dragons, they're like ground forces just keep getting ambushed, and they're like, "Where the hell is everybody?" Every time they turn up in Sunspear, like no one's there, and I'm like, "What?" It's really spooky and cool, and that they remain independent for so long because of that. And then there's this Vulture King that you hear about, which is just a random Dornish person with a lot of charisma that encourages Dornish people to like attack either Highgarden or the Stormlands. So you have a lot of antagonism between the Dornish and the Baratheons of Storm's End, constant fighting, and they don't get on so well. And they are both really cool houses as well, the Baratheons and Dornishmen. Very cool, very cool. And as you can see on the map behind me, no, moving away. So you got Sunspear there, there's Dawn at the bottom, and then there's Storm's End right there, the Stormlands. Not too far from Essos as well. I feel like I'm giving a weather report in this episode, really. So we've got lots of snow and sleet up here, plus a bunch of White Walkers. And you go all the way down south, sunshine, lovely, great place for a holiday. Brilliant. So, anything you want to add about Storm's End or about the places you've spoken about?
I would say that from the place I've spoken about, I would still say that after just mentioning Storm's End, I would still probably say tell snow's bad, but as you said, winter is on a hot spring. It has its own history. And I think you're more likely not to get killed, especially the fact that the Starks have a long line of history before Aegon the Conqueror that they've passed like from father to son, all the way down. But then if you look at all the other places, they haven't lasted as long, or they have even more turmoil than the Starks do.
Yeah, I suppose that like family tradition shows some like stability. Although, if you're talking about what happens in the books and the TV show, or the Boltons come along and doing that for them, but then the Starks do take it back. To be fair, but yeah, you definitely sold me at that hot spring. I'm sure if Game of Thrones transitioned to the modern era, that would turn into like a bathhouse or something, kind of like the ones in Budapest. That'd be a great holiday spot. Okay, so let's take a look at my places. So as we're in the southern region, I might as well talk about Old Town. So Old Town is, believe it or not, the oldest city in Westeros. Wow, what a surprise. Honestly, what a great name. And it is the most popular city in Westeros at the beginning of the Targaryen conquest. If you read the Fire and Blood books, it goes into a bit of detail about this. It traces its roots back to the first men from 12,000 years before the start of the Game of Thrones series, when you're looking at the era of Robert Baratheon on the throne. It's the home of the Citadel, which is where all the Maesters go to get trained. So if you want to become a Maester in the world, you go to basically uni in Old Town. I wonder if they have like lots of pubs there where the Maesters go and get trashed on a Tuesday night on absolutely horrible drinks. I wouldn't put it past that. It's also the home of the Starry Sept, which is, I didn't read into this one too much. Maybe you might know, but it's basically like the Vatican in a way of the new gods, the religion of the seven. So you get like the High Sept in there, and throughout the Fire and Blood series, you get a lot of antagonism coming from the Starry Sept and the Targaryens, because the High Septon finds the Targaryens who have a lot of incest and like marry each other. Like, for example, Aegon a Targaryen married both of his sisters. Yeah. Holy cow. Yeah. And the High Sept is like, nah, that's an abomination. And it's just quite a interesting relationship between the religion and the crown as well, because like what happened in Europe as well, you had like this justification for the monarchy based on divine right. So the Septon and the Starry Sept in Old Town would help justify the Targaryen rule, although not when there was incest. But then they have these big fights and arguments, and eventually they cave in and they're like, okay, the Targaryens can have incest, but no one else can. So that's the kind of world Game of Thrones is. There's a religion saying one royal family can have incest, but not the others. So a bit more about Old Town. So when Aegon invaded Westeros, the High Septon fasted and prayed for 7 days on whether the High Towers of the Reach should resist Aegon's army. And eventually he comes to the conclusion that, like, nah, probably because the dragons were going to burn everything down. So that was quite a wise move. But apparently the answers came from God instead. So Lord Hightower opens the gates and pledges fealty to Aegon on the High Septon's advice. Now, it's important to note that the Hightowers were the liege lords or the kings of the Reach, but then eventually it went to the Tyrells because of their loyalty to the Targaryens. But correct me if I'm wrong on that. I feel like we might get some fans writing in accusing me of spreading fake news.
I believe you are. I believe you are correct. I think it's either that they side with the wrong Targaryen and end up, or I think it's what you said earlier. They use basically guys and poison to basically find a way to make sure
guys and poison. I love that.
Then they can take over the Reach. Yeah,
guys and poison. Oh, I love it. Great phrase. That is how I take out my enemies in real life as well. So, yeah, interesting sort of backstory to how the Tyrells came to power. And originally it was Old Town that ruled over that area. Now, compared to King's Landing, which I'll be talking about momentarily, so Old Town is considered larger and more beautiful and has better city or better urban planning than King's Landing, and is thousands of years old. And compared to King's Landing is only about 300 roughly at the start of the Game of Thrones books, because that's where Aegon landed, surprisingly. So think of it as like a beautiful, amazing, gorgeous European city, but then compare that to King's Landing, which is like a city that's just grown out of nothing and is like a lot of urban sprawl. There's no city planning going on, etc., etc. It's considered maybe more of like the cultural capital as well in the books. It has its own city watch as well, much like King's Landing as well. And the High Tower, that you might hear about in the TV show or the books, is the tallest building in Westeros. It's essentially just a giant lighthouse that's used to guide ships that are sailing between the Arbor, from Lannisport, etc. And there's a really cool story in Fire and Blood. So if you look at the map of the known world in Westeros, you can see that from Westeros, there's nothing west of it. There's nothing west because no one sailed that far. In Fire and Blood, there's a story of 3 ships that sail all the way out west trying to find some new land or hopefully encounter Savorios, which you might be able to see if my body's not blocking it. And they essentially land there. They discover all these amazing spices, trades, but exotic, weird animals that sound like they're from myths. And they bring it all the way back to Old Town with them, and they bring spices, and Old Town kind of grows from that that historic adventure. So you get this really cool historical basis there, because you get that feeling of like what happened with the discovery of the Americas. Originally, they were looking for India, but they ended up discovering the Americas, whilst in the Game of Thrones universe, they were trying to find a way to Savorios or Essos, but they just ended up randomly encountering something else. Again, you're seeing some historical basis there. Bit more history to do with Old Town. So it's struck by 2 major plagues in a century. Oh, not plagues and pandemics. Here we go again. We're just about getting over one, although it's still lingering. So there's a pandemic called the Great Spring Sickness. And essentially, this was such a bad plague that the population size decreased to being less of King's Landing. So therefore, whilst Old Town was the largest and most beautiful city at the start of the Targaryen conquest, it does essentially become less in size and King's Landing takes over. So some more sort of historical basis for Old Town and where the idea came from, where George R. Martin got inspiration from, was Alexandria in Egypt. That was founded by Alexander the Great in the 4th century BCE. And you can see some like real strong similarities. So the Great Library of Alexandria, one of the wonders of the world, is essentially the citadel. It's got a very strong inspiration from that. And then the Great Lighthouse of Alexandria, well, that's definitely got to be the high tower that's guiding all these ships about. So you can see there, again, some really strong roots and influences. This is why I love the Game of Thrones books, because if you're a bit of a history nerd like me, these things really stand out to you. And at the time of the TV show, House Hightower is a vassal of House Tyrell, who are liege lords of the South. So, would you want to live there, Josh?
Old Town, I would say yes. I would say one of the things, as you said, I'm also like a history buff as well. And the fact that it has so many similarities with Alexandria in Egypt. And I think I was like reading it, they kind of like have like sphinxes as well. Similar to the way they have it in Egypt as well. And I think one of the things that I wish like the TV series did more was put like more of an emphasis on Old Town. Because I think Old Town is like after King's Landing, or even potentially before King's Landing, is one of the most important cities in Westeros. And I think you don't really feel it as much, because when you think about the Game of Thrones series, you always think about Winterfell and then you think about King's Landing. But I think the fact that Old Town is where all the Maesters are trained. So it's like a university town, as you've mentioned. It's a place of learning, which kind of reminds me like of like old Rome, especially like Rome in the medieval times when you had like the Vatican base there, and then you would have all the monks there as well who would go there to learn, and then they would then go out to the different countries in Europe, and then you would have like a cardinal for each individual king. So you kind of had something similar to that, with the Maesters being attached to all of the different lords, and also to the king of Westeros as well.
I know, and me and you being Maesters, we trained there as well. Those were the good old days at uni. Yeah, and I suppose I guess that's why it's considered like the cultural capital, or what at least was the cultural capital of Westeros, because they have the Starry Scepter and the Maesters, and that's spread out and influenced the rest of Westeros, apart from the North and the Iron Islands. The North have the old gods, but they do have Maesters, whilst the Iron Islands have, I don't think they have Maesters. I think they're trying to shoo that all away, and they definitely don't have the new gods as well, because they have their own, the drowned god.
Yeah, and I think also people forget like other like groups within this Westeros, like the Silent Sisters. I think they're also based out of Old Town as well. And I think also they have like the great, as you mentioned, the great library at Old Town. And in the TV series, it's in the great library that Sam finds out that Jon is actually the son what's his name again?
Rhaegar
Rhaegar
Targaryen.
Targaryen, yes. And he's he's not the bastard son because they actually did get married. And all
Oh my
the marriage
God.
certificate
My
is
hairs are
actually
standing
in
up
Old
on
Town.
end. I'm getting goosebumps. I know, it's so epic when he discovered. I remember that scene. Oh, so cool. And again, you are kind of right. Like, I wish they showed you more of Old Town in the TV show. You just see the library, really, don't you? I can't remember if you even see the old tower. To be honest, in the books, I don't think they really show you much of Old Town as well. Like, it's talked about, but I don't remember any scene being set there. But again, it has been a while since I read the books. But yeah, cool place. And I think I'm definitely going to have to agree with you. Out of all the places we've talked about so far, I'd definitely pick Old Town. It reminds me of like going to Prague. In my mind, I feel like this place could also be similar to Prague, walking down those streets with that Gothic architecture, and having like some really old famous universities there as well, like Charles University. Oh God, I need to go abroad. Summertime, I'm still in the UK. What am I doing there? Okay, so that's Old Town. So the next place I have to talk about, because this is such a like key place in the TV show and the books, is King's Landing. Now, King's Landing is the largest city in the known world in A Song of Fire and Ice and at the start of the TV show. It's called King's Landing because guess what? Aegon Targaryen, the first king of Westeros, landed there. What a great name for the place. And it is like a mess, basically. It's unplanned, it's overpopulated, it's disorganized. There's slums such as Flea Bottom. The population is estimated to be about 500,000 by the time of Robert's Rebellion, just before the start of the TV show. There's a lot of wealth, but there's also a lot of poverty, and there's corruption everywhere. It's like a viper's nest. I believe the Dornishmen call it that in the TV show. And the way the Starks talk about going down to King's Landing's like, don't go there. It's full of political intrigue and all this horrible madness. And, there's some really cool, interesting settings there as well. So you've got the Red Keep, which is basically I can't remember like details of medieval castles, but the Red Keep's like the castle within the walled city, right? Like where the king has to themselves, essentially, which is supposed to be like really cool. And reading the Fire and Blood books, talking about how the Red Keep was built by Maegor the Cruel to have all these weird, horrible secret passageways underneath, and these black cells as well, where people are just thrown away and forgotten about for ages, awaiting trial. Really cool. People end up there and they're just gone from history. And so many people, that happens to so many people, because Game of Thrones, people die all the time, all the amazing, great characters. Ned Stark, Daenerys Targaryen. Oh God, terrible cough.
Catelyn Stark, let's not forget her as well.
Yeah. Well, our audience knows what to deal with us already. So it's a dangerous city, King's Landing. The City Watch maintain law and order over it. They're referred to as the Gold Cloaks in both the TV show and the books. And again, whoever's in command of the City Watch is very much a corrupt individual in the books and in the TV show, especially in like the spin-off book, Fire and Blood. In the TV show, it's someone called Janos Slynt, who's just a horrible man who will literally follow Cersei's orders, like going around executing all these babies or kids who are supposedly Robert Baratheon's bastard children. Pretty nasty stuff going on in King's Landing. There's also two other places I've got to mention as well that are interesting saying. So there's the Great Sept of Bait. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Quickly on your point about like King's Landing and what you were saying earlier about how the Starks and also the rest of the Seven Kingdoms talk about it. It's like King's Landing is like separate, like completely different from the rest of the Seven Kingdoms. The fact that like you can have, I think it's like, because it's like a cosmopolitan of people from all over Westeros, it's like they have their own different way of doing things, different way of seeing things. And as you said, if you're in charge of like the gold cloaks within King's Landing, you then literally rule the city.
Yeah, exactly. And there's one Targaryen character, and I think it's Daemon Targaryen, who you will see in the spin-off TV show coming out soon. And he's supposed to be quite badass in that. And he'll be played by Matt Smith, who played one of the Doctor Who's. I'm not a big fan of Matt Smith. I found his Doctor Who quite annoying, but I think he's quite a good actor, so he might play Daemon Targaryen quite well. But he becomes the leader of the City Watch. And he's actually quite a charismatic leader. They like him a lot, but he's also an absolutely disgusting, horrible man who spends his time in brothels, gets into fights, and just kills people. Like outright, he's got very Maegor the Cruel vibes. And that brings me on to another great setting, Littlefinger's brothel, which caters to the wealthiest in the city. Now, this is probably one of the most 18 plus places in King's Landing and in the TV show as well. And there's this sort of idea in the TV world that the Game of Thrones TV show coined. It's where you get a character to explain a boring plot point that's talking about law or something else, whilst there's a sex scene going on. So essentially there's eye candy whilst some characters talking about something political, and it's to keep viewers watching, I guess. And Game of Thrones apparently sort of coined this, so that's one good thing the TV show did. I'm sure other TV shows took inspiration from that. And one thing that happens at Littlefinger's brothel is it's destroyed by the Faith Militant in one of the later seasons of the show, because it's seen as a sinful, horrible place, and it's owned by Littlefinger, who's a very ambitious, very corrupt, very wiggly man that we spoke about earlier. So it's also suffered major attacks as well, being the capital of Westeros and being the Game of Thrones, where if you play the Game of Thrones, you either live or you die. Of course, a lot of bad things are going to happen to King's Landing. So, for example, before the start of the TV show, the King's Landing was attacked by the Lannisters. So Robert's rebellion was raging on. It looked like all was lost for the Targaryens. Mad King Aerys was locked up in the Red Keep, and the Lannisters, who throughout the whole of Robert's rebellion had sat back and chilled. They're playing it cool. Tywin Lannister being such a like realpolitik, like very cunning individual, just chilled. And then they come in at the last minute. They come to King's Land and say, "Don't worry, guys." Like, they're standing outside the gates. Like, "Don't worry, we're here to defend the city from the savage Northmen and the bastard Robert. Let us in." And King Aerys like, "Yes, finally, Tywin Lannister's come to save us." As soon as he opens the gates, what do you think happens? Absolute bloodbath. It gets sacked. And a sacking, I looked up this definition. So to sack a city is a concept imported from the Latin languages in the mid-16th century to mean essentially putting a town or community in the sack, in the sense of taking its goods, which I find quite a weird thing. Before I looked that up, I thought sacking is like pillaging. Like there'll be pubs will be raided, there'll be people like executed, there'll be madness going on. Putting a community or town in the sack, pretty weird phrase. But yeah, and then Jaime Lannister, who's a member of the King's Guard, whilst this is all going on, he's with King Aerys, and King Aerys is like, "Burn it all down, burn the entire city down," because he's an absolute mad cookie. Jaime Lannister turns around and just stabs him right in the back and kills him. And for that, he's forever known as the Kingslayer. And at first, because he's a douchebag at the start of the TV show and books, but as he does this character arc, you feel sorry for him. And the fact that he's called Kingslayer, you find out he did it because King Aerys was going to burn down King's Landing, like his absolute nut job. Like, really cool character arc there. Just shows you how much of a cool place King's Landing is.
Yeah, and like even to your point we're raising about like how the Lannisters stepped back during Robert's rebellion,
Yeah.
it just shows how bad, how mad like the King Aerys was. The fact like he like insulted like Tywin Lannister like 6 or 7 times to his face, like the weird thing that could have happened is that Rhaegar was actually supposed to marry Cersei.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
that, and like you remember in the books and also in the TV series, you have like where she's younger, she goes to see a fortune teller who tells her that she'll be queen, but then someone will then come and replace her. So she thinks that she's going to be married to Rhaegar, and then her father is trying to get her married to Rhaegar, which should have happened to secure the Targaryen line. But then he's like, no, why should I marry my son to any old woman when I can marry him to a princess, which was the Princess of Dawn, who he eventually married. So then that was one of the slights that caused like Tywin Lannister to get pissed off. And then when he then takes like Jaime Lannister to be a part of the Kingsguard, meaning that he can't inherit, he also pissed off. And then he got rid of him as being the hand of the king as well. So like I think at the time, Tywin was just like, you know what? Why should I go save this bastard after he's insulted me to my face 6 or 7 times? Let's see what happens. And then he's like, okay, then,
enough. Yeah.
Okay, then we can get rid of him now. Especially the fact, and I think that's the key thing with Tywin Lannister is that he plays the long game. Any of the times he insulted him, he could have stabbed him in the back, but was like, no, I'm gonna wait. I'm going to wait until the perfect moment. And then in that perfect moment, he almost like wiped out the whole of the Targaryens, apart from 2 of them, which was Daenerys and her brother, who were able to escape. And like, you also then see what he does with Robert Baratheon as well. He just bides his time and then gets rid of, with the help of what's his name again? What's the Maester as well that the Lannisters get involved? What's his name again? Maester.
Pycelle?
I know he's the Grand. Yeah, so he's the Grand Maester, and they convince him to be a part of the plot as well. And I think the fact that Tywin Lannister takes the long game and then waits so long to then get rid of him. And to your point, the fact that Mad King Aerys was going to burn down King's Landing to basically say that if I can't have King's Landing, no one
can.
And I'll burn it down with fire to the ground. And and I think Jaime also killed like the Pyromancer as well, and then killed off Aerys as well.
Yeah, he does. He does. I think, I think he does. I'll have to look that up. But that wildfire is still sitting there by this. Is it the second? Well, at least the second series. There's a great scene where essentially Stannis Baratheon besieges King's Landing. And in order to repel them, they put out this massive chain that catches all the boats, although that's not in the TV show, that's in the books. And then they set off all this wildfire, which is big, green, crazy flames. That's essentially like napalm, the way it's described in the TV show. In the books. And that wildfire is scary stuff. It's just sitting there all over the city, just waiting to be ignited by accident or on purpose by Mad King Aerys. It's madness. And it's difficult to talk about King's Landing without talking about Essos as well, because as you say, it's quite got a mix of cultures there. So as you can see on the amazing map behind me, that it's not far from Pentos, Tyrosh, Myr, all these other, and Braavos as well. And there's a lot of politicking that goes on with those 3 cities. So, for example, with Iron Bank of Braavos lends the royal family the Iron Throne lots of dollar in Game of Thrones, and it's constantly an issue that they have debt, like growing debt in the Iron Throne. And it's talked about a lot in Fire and Blood, and it just reminds me way too much of real life. This is again where Game of Thrones is just so real, like constantly talking about austerity and cutbacks and taxes and stuff. Like, oh God, I read books to get away from that. But it's quite good. It's like that realistic fantasy again that I think is quite cool.
And then the fact that like rebellions cost money, and then they were like, you know what, we're not getting. And I think it was Mad King Aerys who basically said that I'm king, I renege on all my debts, and I'll never pay them. So they were like, okay, then if you're not going to pay your debts to us, because I think he incurred a lot of debts with them because he kept on like having these like lavish tournaments, was like but going through loads of money. And I think they basically said, fine, then if you're not going to pay us, then Robert Baratheon will fund him and then he'll eventually pay us. And then he then became king, and then he did almost exact same thing, banquets and jousts, and was just burning through their money. And I think there's a really like key and important scene. There's two scenes. Like Stannis goes to them and says that provide me with the funds and I will bring order back to Westeros. And the fact that they then give him her loan, and then later on they speak to Cersei, and then Cersei then takes the money that the Tyrells have by sacking where they are to then pay off and pay back the Iron Bank. And the fact that everyone is in fear of the Iron Bank, because if you don't pay up, they'll literally get rid of you as king and replace you with someone else.
Yeah, and I could draw so many like ideas about what goes on in the real world and debts and countries, and yeah, it's really cool. I do like Bravos's role in the Game of Thrones universe. And whilst we're sort of touching on like a bit of how Game of Thrones relates to reality and like some of the inspiration, so you were seeing a TV show. The filming location for a lot of the scenes in King's Landing was Dubrovnik in Croatia, which is a lovely city. I haven't been there, but I've heard you can go on lots of walking tours that are just based on Game of Thrones. So you could actually go to where they've filmed things, and the tour guide will tell you some details about it. And it's created such a tourist industry of it. It's like if you go to Scotland, all they talk about is Harry Potter, or if you go to King's Cross in London, you've got the Harry Potter store there next to Platform 9 3/4. Must never forget these TV show or film adaptations from books are also all about money, just like Bravo says. It's all about money. So I was looking this up as well. I found a hostel in Dubrovnik that's called King's Landing, but it's located in the part of Dubrovnik that's called Old Town. Joke of the week. Joke of the week, honestly. I wonder if they knew that when they were naming the place. But yeah, I thought I'd just share that little nugget of information there. So any final thoughts? Actually, no, we've forgotten. So where do we want to live now? Where that's
a good one.
Yeah.
I'd still have to say Old Town, because I think one of the things that Old Town has is a form of like independence, especially because of, as you said, the Sept is based there, the Maesters are based there, that they have like this independent power system that, even though they are within the Tyrell sphere of influence, they kind of have like their own like semi-independence. So therefore they can work by themselves, and they're less likely, and they haven't been attacked as much. Because based on what you said about King's Landing, you've got the different plagues that have gone on. You've got like, as you said, the squalor that's in the city.
Oh, it's a filthy city, mate.
The fact that you've got the fact that Mad King Aerys almost literally burnt the whole thing down. Then the fact that Cersei blew up the High Septum there in the city.
Yeah, that was
the fact that Stannis invades as well. I think I would still have to say that the Old Town would probably be the place I would stay.
Yeah, Old Town seems pretty safe, to be honest. Like, it hasn't been invaded. Well, I don't think it ever actually gets attacked in the books. There's some Dornish. I think one of the Vulture Kings kind of camps outside and does stuff, but never actually manages to get through the walls. And it's pretty safe, Old Town, and it's surrendered to the Targaryens, so it never got set on fire. Yeah, I'd say I'd probably choose Old Town. It's pretty safe. It's nice. It's beautiful. Good urban planning. Yeah, definitely. It's funny how me and you don't even like give a crap about Storm's End. Like, I suppose it's not really. Again, it's not seen in a TV show apart from when Melisandre goes to, I think it's like some weird sewer beneath Storm's End, and like gives birth to that weird shadow baby that looks like Stannis.
Well, when Stannis besieges Renly, I remember.
Yeah. Holy cow, that was a weird scene. That's when you realize magic was back into the world of Game of Thrones. I mean, I suppose you saw the dragons before that, but arguably you could say that's not magic. But then when you see the Red Priest do that, that's like, whoa, holy cow, that's epic. Like, what a great scene that was.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, wow. So many locations, so many ideas for my holiday. I think I'd probably avoid the most out of all of them. As much as Harrenhal is scary, at least it gives me power to be there. Pike, horrible, rough, nasty place, but it means you'd be a great sailor, so you can just go around places. I think I just wouldn't want to be in Winterfell just because it's so cold and spooky with the crypts underneath. I think that's one place I would definitely avoid.
I think the issue is also like cut off as well.
Yeah.
I think because the north is so large that the gap between the different settlements and different places is so huge. So it's literally like cut off from the rest of the Seven Kingdoms as well.
Yeah, and you got to remember in those times, unless you got a dragon, the distances to get somewhere are just immense. Unless you're Jon Snow in the final season, in which case he's just darting around all over the place. I mean, he does eventually get his own dragon, but this was before he even gets his own dragon. And it's like, if you look how far the White Walkers have to travel up until they get to Winterfell compared to Jon Snow, it's like, what? How slow are these White Walkers moving, and like how many Ubers is Jon Snow taking? Like, it's just mental.
Yeah, literally, like based on like the map you've got behind you, like from Winterfell all the way to Dragonstone, and then to King's Landing, and then
yeah, man, honestly, it's silly, but hey, we've got that coming up soon. Don't you worry. Stay tuned, folks. We'll be talking so much crap about the final season. Yeah.
One thing I also remember about Pike. So during the rebellion, when they invaded the Ironborn rebellion against Robert Baratheon, basically because they didn't see him as being as strong or as powerful as the Targaryens, they thought it would be their opportunity. It will be the opportunity for the Greyjoys to then declare their own independence. I think when they were then and I think one of the things that surprised also the Greyjoys was that the rest of Westeros sided with the Baratheons and sided with King Robert, because I think what they were thinking is that only maybe the North, because of his relationship with Ned Stark, and potentially the area as well because of the Hand of the King was from there as well, and then the Stormlands would actually join in the war. But in fact, the Lannisters also took part in the war as well, and also so did the Reach as well. Both of them, the Reach was reluctant, but they also did join the war. And I think that was the war that made Forest of Myr famous, because when he invaded the castle in Pike, he literally attacked with his fire sword. And I think that's where he first appeared in like the Game of Thrones universe, and that's where he became famous. Because he literally led the charge when they broke through into Pike, and literally was fighting, and he scared off so many of the Iron Islanders just because he was attacking with this fire sword. And as he was drunk at the time, so literally drunkard with a fired sword, cutting through all these different people.
Yeah, he is a proper badass, Thoros of Myr. Really cool with that flaming sword. And again, you see that come up in the TV show when he fights the Hound. Oh, we definitely got to pick up on a character episode that'll be coming soon, along with a Talking Crap episode about the final series. Well, I think without further ado, I think we should call it a day there. We've come to the end of the episode, and I just want to say thanks so much, Josh, for being just a great co-host. Me and you could talk for hours about Game of Thrones, and boy, we sure will. And when it comes to the spin-off TV show coming out, we'll be doing hopefully an episode by episode review of each one that comes to be. So I want you, if you as our viewers want to hear the full episode, make sure you have subscribed to our Patreon page. The link will be shared down below. If you want to hear more from us, the Two Maesters, then make sure you subscribe to the channel or follow us on the podcast on whatever listening platform you're using. If you like the video, a like and a comment is always appreciated, especially when you're talking about any fake news that we've been spreading about the Game of Thrones universe. I'm sure there's some out there. And make sure you click the notification bell so you never miss one of our episodes. Well, thank you for being an absolutely fantastic audience, and we will see you soon. Winter's coming.